everyone: technicians, politicians, legal experts, and legal scientists in this field. NIS2, supply chain, security by design, technology risk impact assessment, digital sovereignty, as well as data privacy and IoT. As we have seen, the global threat situation has been challenging in the last years, and everything has changed. This is also regarding cybersecurity threat vectors. And this is why I'm talking about holistic approaches on cyber policy and regulatory approaches in this field. Looking forward to seeing you there. Hopefully, you have a lot of questions for me.
Welcome to Talk.CYBER.
Bienvenue.
Okay, I'll go with that one. Okay, so welcome to the first edition of Talk.CYBER of 2024, and it's again a firework of very interesting topics that we have this year. You might have checked the website already. So we have quite a nice set, and we have the perfect start for the year because we have Dennis-Kenji Kipker today with us. We'll give a talk on global challenges and holistic legal approaches in cyber resilience. And before I hand over to Dennis, which will be in some seconds, as always, we have the participatory element, and it's the most interesting if you ask lots of questions, if you interact, and therefore we have our second channel. We have our second channel that you see here on the left. So it's on Slido, on sle.do/talk34, because it's the 34th edition today. Connect even if you don't have immediate questions, because then you can follow a bit what's happening, and you can also upvote and downvote questions. So therefore, always a good idea to connect that. So you also see the URL on the normal image here. So we always have this small tag. I will also put it to the chats. So yeah, connect, and if you still have some friends who might have missed the start because we're a little bit late today, don't hesitate to notify them, because more people are more interested is. And as always, the recording will be available directly after this session, and therefore also don't hesitate to share it with friends. And so that you can also discuss under the article, under the videos, and we're looking forward to that. So, as said, today's topic: global challenges and holistic legal approaches in cyber resilience. And I'm super happy that Dennis agreed to participate in that, because we know each other actually for quite a while. Didn't do too much in recent times, and therefore I'm even more happy that today you could take the time to enlighten us and to share things with us. I will come to your CV in a second, but just as an opening, Dennis is super active especially on the German side, from the legal perspective. He's in the Gesellschaft für Informatik. He's active in different societies and so on, and so therefore it's a really great pleasure and honor having you here today. So, Professor Dr. Dennis-Kenji Kipker is a scientific director of the Cyberintelligence.institute in Frankfurt am Main, and he's a visiting professor at the private Riga Graduate School of Law in Latvia, which was founded by the Soros Foundation. Here he conducts research on topics at the interface of law and technology in cybersecurity, corporate strategy, and digital resilience in the context of global crisis, with particular focus on Chinese and US IT law. Kipker is an advisor to the German federal government and the European Commission, and a member of the advisory board of the private cybersecurity company NordVPN. He also is a reviewer for the Bavarian Academy of Sciences and Humanities and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Dennis works voluntarily for the World Justice Project in the USA. And with that introduction, I'm super happy to welcome you, and I give the floor and the stage to you, Dennis. Looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for being here today and having the possibility to speak about some of the topic which I find quite interesting, but also very important for cybersecurity policy and economy in the upcoming years. And this is why I've chosen to to present a somewhat holistic overview about cybersecurity regarding global challenges and holistic legal approaches. And this won't be a very, very long presentation. I have just focused on the most important things, so that there's also some more time to have talks and to think about the upcoming policies, regulation, and so on. But now let us just start with the topic cybersecurity, global challenges, and holistic legal approaches. And when we think about cybersecurity, we have a lot of challenges currently. And in my opinion, the most important event that happened in the last 4 years was the Corona pandemic, with the rise of disinformation campaigns, but also regarding threats to cybersecurity. And then in February 2022, the war in Russia started, when Ukraine started, the Russian-Ukraine war. And now we have the war in Israel, and also upcoming tensions, political tension, geopolitical, strategic tensions between the People's Republic of China and Taiwan. And there we see a lot of differences at the moment regarding the cybersecurity threat situation. And this is also why the policymakers globally are focusing on that topic. And it's not only about cybersecurity. I think we talk more than a few years ago about concepts of holistic approaches of digital resilience in total. And on this slide, you can see some of the points which I really consider the most important points, and which will also be relevant for legal policy, but cyber policy in general during the next years, and hopefully also until the end of the decade, because these are some core topics that we see here. For example, the supply chain topic. The supply chain topic firstly came up during the Corona pandemic, when a lot of Chinese international exporting harbors were closed. So that microchips, for example, could not be imported into the European Union, but also to some other states. And due to these shortages, production was limited. For example, in Germany, the German big car manufacturers were not able to complete their cars due to this lack of technology that they were facing. But we are also seeing cyber attacks on the digital supply chain, which are more important than ever. That means that you cannot rely on just a third-party company saying, well, I outsource everything which I have in my IT, because we have made some decisions which business incentives are costly and which are not. But we have to focus onto this whole supply chain topic more than ever, and it's about trustworthy and functioning supply chains. And I think this is one of the big challenges we are facing for this decade when it comes to digital resilience. Another point I would like to mention is security by design. So in the last decade, we have made progress in a lot of topics regarding digitization. We have networked our society. We have created new devices, new technology. And now where we see that everything is mostly working from some perspective, we also have seen that our society, our economy is more vulnerable than ever when it comes to cyber threats. And this is why, of course, you can talk about preventative security measures, you can talk about information security management system, but this is all, these kind of debates are useless when you do not have secure technology. And this is why security by design is currently carried directly into the companies. And we'll see that later on, because we have special regulations only dealing with the topic security by design, not only in the B2C sector, but also in the B2B sector, where we have new obligations that I guess will be coming this year in mid 2024, declaring security by design as one of the main corporate goals regarding cyber resilience. Another thing I would like to mention, another aspect which I consider relevant, is the question of technology risk impact assessment, because in the last 4 years we have made a lot of progress. Also, when it comes to artificial intelligence, we have seen a wave of generative AI threats on the one hand, but on the other hand, also regarding possibilities coming out of artificial intelligence. And this is why technology risk impact assessment, in my opinion, is an important issue that we have to face as well. And we can find that in some legal obligations that were also upcoming. For example, in the European Artificial Intelligence Agency Act, But there's a lot of more than just that, because technology risk impact assessment also deals with topics such as disinformation, cybersecurity, digital privacy, and even if we are allowed to use certain technologies that have not been tested yet for new possibilities in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And another topic which is quite intensively linked to the topics I mentioned before is the topic of digital sovereignty. So of course, we have been talking for several years about digital sovereignty. But as I mentioned, due to all these issues of supply chain, security by design, technology risk impact assessment also means where from which countries does technology come from? Is it really trustworthy technology that we are using? This is why all these cyber resilience concepts are closely linked to the idea of digital sovereignty. So what has to be done, especially in the European Union, that European Union states become more digital sovereign, that we do not have to rely on foreign technology, for example. This is a big debate we are currently facing, and there is no single solution for that. And of course, not everything which comes from third party states is risky. That has to be considered as well. But there might be some issues where we'll have to think about this topic of digital sovereignty stronger than a few years ago. And with that, of course, we are talking about data privacy as well. So, for example, where does our data go to? Does our data go to states which aren't that secure from a cybersecurity perspective? And the whole topic of IoT devices and IoT threats, which is very important as well, because IoT devices is a very broad term and it's not legally defined, but it's quite clear that IoT devices are not only used in the private sector, but especially in the business sector, and they are often not very secure from a cybersecurity perspective. Um, and this is why here the gap that we have closes, because IoT is also linked to security by design. And I think these are the core topics and challenges we are currently facing for this decade until 2030, to get the economy more secure and to get the society more secure as well. And we are, of course, have the super election year 2024. We have elections not only in the European Union to the European Parliament, but we have elections to presidential elections in the US as well. And there are a lot of other countries in the world currently having elections this year. So we have an exposed threat situation, new attack vectors, but not a holistic approach, in my opinion, how to deal with that. And I would like to tackle all these challenges regarding the policy approach that the European Union is currently taking. And regarding this European Union policy perspective, we have an announcement here that you can see on this slide, which comes from the former EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. And the President of the European Union does give a speech each year, the so-called State of the Union address, in which he or she says what are the most important topics currently, what do we have to do, what have been the progress that we made in the last year. And here, this part of the speech that I've been taking out here is about the topic cyber resilience, cybersecurity. So he says, in the past 3 years, we have made progress in keeping Europeans safe online. But Europe is still not well equipped when it comes to cyber attacks. This is why today the Commission is proposing new tools, including the European Cybersecurity Agency, to help defend us against such attacks. And as you can see on this slide deck here, the speech is quite old. So it comes from 13th of September 2017, so quite a long time ago. And as I mentioned, in my personal opinion, and also in my opinion as a scientist, the corona pandemic was the start into this new decade which I call the decade of resilience, not only cyber resilience, but a holistic approach of resilience. And Jean-Claude Juncker stated already in 2017 that there have been some approaches taken by the European Union, but they have not been sufficient. And now we have the year 2024, and the threat situation has changed, technology perception has changed, and also the way how society, economy, and state are interconnected in a digital way has also changed. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, where does the statement come from, and where do we currently go to regarding European and also global cyber policy? And the question is, firstly, what has been done so far in the past regarding European Union? And firstly, the European Union said, well, Cyber risk assessment, cybersecurity, of course, it has something to do with the protection of personal data, but the birthplace of European Union cybersecurity law was not data privacy law, it was critical infrastructure protection law. And what you can see on this part of the slide deck is the legal situation that we had so far in the past regarding cybersecurity. And as you can see, it's mostly about critical infrastructure operations. So on the one hand, you'll find critical infrastructure operators which have to secure their services against cyber threats regarding availability, integrity, authenticity, for example, of IT systems. And certain countermeasures have to be made by these critical operators of infrastructures. On the other hand, they have to cooperate. They have to cooperate with the state authorities. That means national cyber security authorities in the European Union on one hand, but on the other hand, also regarding the European Network Information Security Agency or Cybersecurity Agency, which is called ENISA. And so far, we had just the duty of these critical infrastructure operators and digital service providers such as online marketplaces, online search engines, and cloud computing services to create an information security management system which corresponds regarding its maturity level to the state of the art of technology. And this state of the art of technology has been defined by concretizations, for example, through industry associations, and all these critical infrastructure operators also had, of course, to provide some evidence by means of audit certification that they are compliant with these cybersecurity rules. And this is mostly based, as you can see here at the bottom line of the slide, on the European cybersecurity strategy dating back to the year 2013, but also on the first Network Information Security Directive. And regarding cyber threats, these critical infrastructure operators had to maintain a contact point to the national cybersecurity authorities, and they had to notify these authorities about significant disruptions that led or might lead to the failure of functioning of their infrastructure. And they'd also prove some information and send some information to the national cybersecurity authorities regarding these disruptions or possible disruptions. And then all the data was analyzed by the authorities, or is analyzed by the authorities, and sent back to the critical infrastructure operators as part of the evaluation and changement of the information security management system. And this is a whole approach that was rolled out by the Network Information Security Directive 1, and which was dealing with critical infrastructure cybersecurity in the whole European Union. But that's not sufficient, of course, because our society, our economy, does not only rely on critical infrastructures. They are, of course, of an outstanding importance for the functioning of the whole European Union. But they are not only the important issues here. And we see regarding threat reports coming from the national cybersecurity authorities, but also from the ENISA, that cyber attacks definitely do not stop at critical infrastructures. They also affect the economy as a whole. So we see that Jean-Claude Juncker was quite right when he said in 2017 September, we have done a lot. Yeah, the European Union really has done a lot regarding European cyber policy, but this is not sufficient. And in 2024, this is really not sufficient because the threat vectors have changed again. And this is why we'll have to ask ourselves, what is to be done now and in the future by legislators, policymakers to tackle these holistic global threats that we see in technology development. And this is why the European Union has proposed several new legislations. EU Network Information Security Directive 2 on the left-hand side, the EU Cyber Resilience Act in the center, and the EU Radio Equipment Directive on the right-hand side. And we also see the EU Chips Act as a bottom line because hardware sovereignty is important when it comes to cybersecurity, because without trustworthy IT, you cannot have an adequate level of cybersecurity. So what is to be done now and what is to be done in the future? These are the important questions. And this is why I would like to address very, very shortly what these four legal regulations mean on one hand, but for example, regarding implementation, but what they also mean regarding policy foresight. and what their global impact could be as well, because even though we had the Brexit, the European Union is still one of the biggest interior economy ecosystems in the world. So we have a lot of power regarding this. And this is also why there are a lot of states outside the European Union taking a closer look at us and evaluating if the concept that we are currently creating in the European Union regarding cyber resilience, if they are also useful in other parts of the world. But to start with the first law, which is called the EU Network Information Security Directive, I would like to address one more thing regarding legal policy considerations in the European Union. So it's about the question of understanding legal policy behind the upcoming new EU cybersecurity regulation, because all these or most of these legal measures I mentioned are based on the current EU cybersecurity strategy, and this is the newest one that we have. The current cybersecurity strategy was presented on 16th of December 2020, and this was, of course, in midst of the Corona pandemic. So it is clearly the case that if the Corona pandemic would not have been happened, the cybersecurity strategies that we currently have in the European Union would have been very different, because the main objective of this current European cybersecurity objective strategy is a crisis-proof and digital Europe. So we have a focus here on crisis-proof and not only a digital Europe or a cyber-secure Europe. It's talking about crisis-proof. And this is why 3 action areas have been mainly defined by the politicians here. First one, resilience, and there we come to this holistic thought and concept of cyber resilience, going beyond cybersecurity as a technical measure. And we see also here the topic of technological independence. That means also the supply with microchips, for example, and the leadership role of the European Union in the technology sector in the world. And it's also about very concrete things. So here's the second bullet point: build operational capacity for prevention, deterrence, and response. So how to react adequately when it comes to cyber attack, not only as a political threat, but also as a technical threat. And when it comes to the political discussion, the cybersecurity strategy is also about promoting a global open cyberspace through more cooperation. So it's not just saying, well, we have some threat vectors, we have some attacker states, but it's also about the policy framework to think about the situation and also how we can change this current threat situation that we are facing globally from a political perspective. And this is why this cybersecurity strategy literally goes a lot beyond just the topic of information security and IT systems. And to start with the first law, which I would like to present very shortly, as mentioned in the beginning, this is the EU Network Information Security Directive 2, and it became public in the end of December 2022. And this is really one of the biggest cybersecurity laws that we are currently discussing in the European Union. And the member states are at the moment working at national transpositioning legal acts. And it's really, in my opinion, a game changer, because this law says, as I mentioned during this short presentation as well, cybersecurity is not just a topic for critical infrastructures or some outstanding companies. It's a topic for everyone, and everyone has to care about this. And this is why this Network Information Security Directive 2 has been presented here by the European Union. So we have a very concrete deadline for the member states to transpose this Network Information Security Directive, which is not directly applicable in all of the European member states, because it's not a regulation, it's a directive. And there's a concrete deadline given by the European Union to create transposing legal acts in the national law until 17th of October this year. And regarding the status, it's quite different. So we have member states that have already started parliamentary negotiations. We have member states that have presented the first draft versions of this law, but there's at the moment not a member state that had really finished the work on this Network Information Security Directive 2. But there are some essential requirements content-wise which we should focus on. So it's firstly about the extension of scope. Secondly, about some new requirements for the member states themselves and affected entities. That means how, in which way, affected entities by this law and member states work together. For example, when it comes to information exchange in cybersecurity, which I consider very important. And it also has a very strict sanction regime compared to the current cybersecurity legislation, which means that this is a hot compliance topic for a lot of companies, and managers will have to deal it. Some are already dealing with that, and and also regarding this sanctions regime, this will lead to the fact that also foreign companies will be taking a closer look on cybersecurity compliance in the European Union, and how to be compliant in a proper way. Regarding the national transposing acts, we have a principle of minimum harmonization. This means that the member states have the power to create stronger laws if they are compliant with, of course, European Union primary law. And it is to say that even though we have ENISA as European cybersecurity hub and authority, NIS2 has its jurisdiction in the member states where the institutions for which the rules are applicable are established. So we have here a clear European Union regulation which focuses on the cybersecurity on a national level. And as I mentioned, with NIS2, cybersecurity is not only a topic for high-level critical infrastructures. It's a general compliance requirement for the whole economy. So nearly for every company, there are a lot of companies that are affected by this law, and it is assumed currently that about 30,000 new companies will be affected alone in Germany. And I guess it will be more than 30,000 companies that are affected only in Germany. And it is also to say that NIS2 is basically applicable not only to these private institutions, which I meant this already several times, it's also applicable to public institutions. So the basic rules here generally that all the services are carried out or provided in the European Union. This is in some way also comparable to the data privacy legislation that we have with the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. But the important thing is here that NIS2 says, well, we are not only applicable to the biggest companies in a European Union country, but we also say, the European Union said, well, we took a look onto a EU recommendation dating back to the year 2003, and we say NIS2 is applicable in general to all small and medium-sized enterprises according to this EU definition. And this is really a game changer in cybersecurity legislation because now a lot of companies that have never thought about digital resilience cybersecurity, they have to deal with very concrete cybersecurity requirements. And the scope of applicability of NIS2 is further concretized by two annex regulations. So the first one is dealing with sectors of high criticality, and the second one is dealing with other so-called critical sectors. And on this slide, you can see all the sectors that will be affected by the NIS2 when it comes to national implementing rules of the law. And you see that some of them are quite common because they are critical infrastructures since NIS1, since 2016. But also some of them are also quite new. For example, energy, transport, banking, financial market infrastructures, or the health sector. We know that it's already critical infrastructure. But also, for example, space sector, ICT service management, manufacture, production, and distribution of chemicals, production, processing, distribution of food, as well as the research sector. But this does not mean public universities or research schools. It's about private commercial research institutions. Because I guess one idea of this behind is because cybersecurity management in the universities is really a nightmare. Because universities are mostly unregulated, bring your own device systems. So this is why it's quite difficult. But it's to say that the whole manufacturing sector will be part of it. So that means computers, electronic products, electrical equipment, machines, motor vehicles. So we see a lot of core industries that are important in the European Union that are definitely affected by the scope of application of this NIS2 directive. And when we combine this qualitative criterion with the quantitative criterion of this recommendation of the European Union regarding small and medium-sized enterprises, we see why this NIS2 directive has such a broad scope of implication, and that also means why this NIS2 directive has such a high political and economically relevant impact factor in the European Union. So this will definitely be a game changer in cybersecurity and digital resilience regulation in the European Union. A second law, which I would like to mention very, very shortly, because it's also of utmost importance for the next years, is the so-called EU Cyber Resilience Act, or its draft version. So regarding this, you have seen this too has been published in the official journal of the European Union already in December 2022. This law has passed the European Parliament in March this year, but has not been officially announced in the official journal of the European Union. So this is why we're currently talking about draft version of this law, but we can call this draft version a pre-final version. And the information that you can see here on this slide, you can see, for example, Thierry Breton, the EU Commissioner for Digitization, when he announced the Cyber Resilience Act. Firstly, he just took a webcam, of course, but it goes beyond that. And in the first draft version of the Cyber Resilience Act, there were several examples made of important entities or important products, software, hardware, embedded systems. So that means all digital products are affected, and the European legislator cancelled some of these annex regulations. They changed it, but I just put it on this slide to show you what cyber resilience means from a product perspective in the European Union and why this law is so important. For example, we see here photo editing, software, word processing, smart speakers, which are a synonym for IoT devices, hard drives, games, but also in some way security technology, critical infrastructure technology, password managers, network interfaces, firewalls, microcontrollers, operating system, industrial firewalls, CPUs, secure elements, so that you already can see the legal term product with digital elements is very widely formulated. And this means the Cyber Resilience Act will definitely be approached for a lot of different hardware, software products all throughout the European Union. And this draft version already contains very concrete recommendations and duties for companies and products that will be affected. And some of the main regulatory aspects of this future EU law include, for example, security by design as life cycle requirement, which I already said is a challenge for this decade, because now manufacturers will have to think or embed cybersecurity right out of the box and from the scratch into a newly designed product. It's not just a bonus feature. There are some reporting obligations concerning vulnerabilities for all these products with digital elements. We have also included supply chain protection involving products from third countries. For example, when you create an IoT device, you always create IoT devices not as a standalone product, but you also use products coming from different manufacturers, and you put them together and create one single product. For example, with software or hardware coming from the US, from Japan, or from the European Union, and there must be a measurement for the supply chain protection, that your supply chain of products, which is a part of the final product, is secure itself. The fourth bullet point here means active involvement of manufacturers, importers, and distributors. And this means that not only manufacturers addressed, but also companies who import and distribute products all throughout the European Union. So we have a broad scope of applicability here as well. And there's a new obligation for charge-free security updates based on the individual product lifecycle. Of course, the question is, what is the individual product lifecycle? And there is no general definition given by the Cyber Resilience Act. And it's also, in my opinion, the task of the manufacturers, the industry associations, to have a definition of certain kind of products regarding their product lifecycle. And last but not least, we have, comparable to the Network Information Security Directive 2, very comprehensive reporting obligations to the ENISA and the designated national cybersecurity authorities. The CRA, as I mentioned, has not been officially announced in the official journal of the European Union, but it can be expected to come in mid-2024. And before we come to an end of this short presentation, I would just like to mention two relevant laws. The EU Radio Equipment Directive, very shortly, which is a special directive dealing with radio equipment. And radio equipment is everything which has an antenna on it. For example, Wi-Fi devices or 5G devices. And there's a special regulation in this EU radio equipment directive regarding cybersecurity and data protection of IoT applications, because the RAD allows to create a delegated act which contains specific requirements for cybersecurity and data protection. And this delegated act has already been created because also the industry association said, well, cybersecurity of radio equipment devices, which are mostly IoT devices, have been a problem in manufacturer and user circles for years. And we have been discussing this problem for years. And this is why the RAD says, well, okay, regarding some of these devices, that means radio equipment connected to the internet, radio equipment that processes personal data, traffic data, or location data, and radio equipment that can transmit money, monetary values, or any kind of virtual currencies. These devices are required to fulfill certain security requirements that are formulated in abstract, and they are currently being concretized through so-called harmonized European Union standards. And this is the case. And we have a clash possibly here with the rules of the Cyber Resilience Act, and we'll see where this will lead us to. But we have two very important regulations when it comes to IoT cybersecurity. And last but not least, the baseline. The baseline is the demand for chips, for computer chips in the European Union. And this is why we have a European Union Chips Act, which was presented, I think, in the first draft version 1.5 years ago, about from the European Union Digital Commissioner Thierry Breton. And the European Union has conducted beforehand a so-called chips survey, which results have been published in August 2022. And one of the main findings was the following. The findings of the recent chips survey launched by the European Commission highlighted that industry expects demand for chips to double by 2030, and we are not that far away from 2030 right now. And this is why the European Union said we need to change our landscape regarding production of computer chips, semiconductor supply chain, and we need really a comprehensive framework consisting of very different policies, tasks, regulation, investments, research as well, and restructuring plans of the whole EU digital economy to fulfill this demand of computer chips by 2030. And this is why the European Union firstly created a EU Common Union Toolbox, which can be considered some kind of a short law which contains the most important assets, so rapid, effective, and coordinated immediate response to semiconductor supply bottlenecks through transnational cooperation and involvement of manufacturers and associations. So you see this holistic approach, which goes a lot beyond cybersecurity, because it's about working together, creating a new digital ecosystem to mention not only the demand to semiconductors, but also to realize in the European Union a higher level of digital sovereignty, and with that, digital resilience. And the European Union also says, well, we need some kind of early warning indicators when it really comes to shortages of semiconductor supply, microprocessor supply. And this is why a union risk assessment will be conducted. That means early warning indicators are created in case of disruptions in the semiconductor supply chain. For example, when you have the case that the demand will increase, the price will increase, or when you see that there's possibly some kind of unavailability of raw materials. And this is why we see cybersecurity, yes, it's important, but cybersecurity itself is somewhat outdated. Now we go for digital resilience, and this needs a holistic approach, holistic concepts. So to come to a conclusion of this short presentation, we have seen the European perspective on the topic, digital resilience. But what's the global perspective? So the question is, how will European cybersecurity strategy, digital strategy, resilience strategy, and regulation affect industries all over the world? And as I mentioned several times, in my opinion, we have the idea of a new concept of digital resilience, which goes much beyond cybersecurity. So cybersecurity itself has evolved from very sector-specific regulation and critical infrastructures that have been picked out in the last years to a very cross-industry measure to secure the entire digital supply chain, not only in one European country, but all throughout the European Union as well, and also regarding B2B and B2C. That's the case. And we see also, based on the impressions we had during the implementation of the EU GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, we see that the European digital laws, they really have an extraterritorial legal effect, not only regarding the regulations, but regarding all rules that are created by the European Union. So we see that foreign manufacturers and service providers in particular are also covered by this, and they are trying to tackle this challenge and to see, well, how can I put all these legal issues that are currently created in the European Union, how can I implement them into my economy ecosystem? And that's really a big challenge for a lot of companies, not only in the European Union. And the last point, which I would like to mention here, is a global comparison. So a lot of countries are looking currently on the European Union cyber resilience perspective, which laws are being created. And there's already a will of some states saying we need to create similar regulations with regard to European Union law. On one hand, because we need to export our products to the European Union, because, as I mentioned, the European Union is still one of the biggest interior markets in the world. And because they say, well, cyber threats and threats to digital sovereignty, they do not stop at the borders. So, and this is why some of these ideas are picked up, and there are similar laws currently being sought in a lot of countries globally. For example, Canada, India, Cambodia, or even China, and also the United States are looking on how we in the European Union are creating laws regarding digital resilience. Yeah, that was it from my side. Very shortly, a holistic overview, hopefully, about European cybersecurity and digital resilience regulation, policy ideas behind it, and the way we'll go, in my opinion, in this decade. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to your questions and remarks. Thank you. I can hear you. That's good.
Test. Okay. Good. So now it's working. The only question is where's the pro test. So there's still some echo. Test.
Okay, I think I hear you on the stream, so I can.
Yes, me too. Well, that's super. Test. Hello, and I cannot hear you if I mute this. Test. Okay, that's still like that even though the code is not in the stream. So, super great talk. I really enjoyed it. It's impossible. I cannot do anything like that. So, can you verify is the echo on the stream work?
Yeah, I think your audio quality is quite poor, so it's difficult to understand.
Yeah, the problem is that my audio is not doing also the echo. Now it should be better, right? Could you give me a sign because I cannot hear you? Is it better? Okay, perfect. Then I will mute it and let's hope that it's good on the stream. So thanks a lot for the super great talk. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, which leave us only 6 minutes for the discussion. It was super nice because we really covered a lot of things and you guys so many hints into directions that there are tons of questions. I have tons of questions, so I already made some math here. And so let me maybe start with a more top-down point of view. So for me, there's always this somehow not united viewpoints that are you have law people and you have technicians or technical people. And so the problem for me is always that I have the impression the technical people, they're advancing very fast, and the low people, they're advancing slow, which is inherent to the process. But the problem is the technology, like we've seen with AI, is advancing then a lot, and the law is way behind. And so the question is, can you say something to this relation and how, why this is not a problem or how this problem could be maybe tackled?
Yeah, of course. That's also a very good question. Regarding the answer, I would say it's quite simple. So innovation does not come from politicians or any legal scientists, because politicians, they always react on a certain situations that they find. And for example, when it comes to cybersecurity regulation, we had been first discussing attacks on critical infrastructure, and this is why we made a special regulation on the digital protection of these critical infrastructures. And now we have seen that, as I mentioned in my presentation as well, threat vectors have changed. So we are not talking just about AI. We are talking about disinformation campaigns. We are talking about cyber threats. And we are talking about the supply chain bottlenecks that we are facing in the corona pandemic. And all these situations has shown us that I would say that in the decade before, we believed in some way that our digitized economy and society was untouchable in some way. So everything was fine, everything was working, globalization was an important topic. And now we see that we have a fallback in some way, because we see that we have these new threat vectors. And of course, regulation will always follow technological innovation. The best example here is the European AI Act, because when there wouldn't have been this approach in the European Union and also globally regarding artificial intelligence, and that of course means not only generative AI, that is quite clear, I would say, there would not have been an explicit regulation of artificial intelligence with different risk assessment classes that we currently see here. So it's always the lawyers and the politicians following technological innovation. That's always the case, and that has never been. That has always been the same situation. And also regarding different technologies, for example, when it comes to 3D printing, for example, when it comes to crypto, when it comes to blockchain, or also encrypted communication, we always see the legal programs following the technical innovation.
Very good. And at the same time, I take a bit your role in that sense, that advocating for it is also, at the same time, the role of the lawmakers is super important, especially when it comes to harmonization, and also when it comes to really enforcing policies like the security by design you were talking about, or also chip sovereignty, so that you have chips that do not necessarily only come from China or the US and things like that. And maybe there could be also a good possibility, which is not so much used so far, I would say, but in cybersecurity, there's always this inherent wish of collaborating between competitors, but it's quite difficult to do. And so there it might also be interesting from a law side to create incentives and also a legal frame for companies to do such a thing. Do you have any comments to the things I was just saying?
Yeah, so I would say when it comes to digital resilience and digital sovereignty, this is not a topic of single companies, because of course companies can create innovation, research institutions are creating innovation, but resilience and sovereignty, that's a state concept, that's a political concept, that's a constitutional concept, and we have to redefine these concepts, because politically speaking, constitutionally speaking, everything has been very, very analog in the last decades. And now we see that this analog way does not work properly anymore, because we are too dependent on technology, and this is what has changed. And now this is also the reason why we see the policymakers currently struggling with the topic of digital sovereignty, because it's not something that you can clearly define, and you have to firstly you have to find out what digital resilience really means in one respective state, because it depends on the technology which is used, how far digitization has been realized in a state, and then you can just say, well, what are certain measures, politically, technologically speaking, that are really necessary to create digital sovereignty. And I think we are currently in that phase at the moment, because we've identified the problem. We have seen that there are certain vectors which we really need to address, but we have not found yet all the solutions necessary for realizing digital sovereignty or some subpart like hardware sovereignty.
Okay, yeah, very, very good. Maybe look, we don't have much time. Maybe the major question that you have from the audience, and I hand over to Loic, my postdoc, who is always doing a great job of moderating the audience. So the floor is yours.
So I guess I'll pick just the first question with the most upvotes. So here it is. The internet does not know borders. How does this map to the law perspective that is very country focused?
Yeah, that's also a very, very good question, because we see regarding cybersecurity and digital resilience, it's not, of course, the legislator and the administrative authorities, they can give some borders, they can give some main lines on how to implement that and what could be a possible duty. But generally speaking, we need a preventative approach. And this is quite clear, because repressive actions won't work in the cyberspace, because, as you already mentioned in your question, states do have some borders, physical borders, but the internet does not have any kind of borders. So we have cyber attackers coming from everywhere, and they are mostly not coming from the European Union itself. And this is why cyber resilience means that we need to take a preventative approach. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we make state authorities, how can we make private companies fitter against cybersecurity threats? And this shows us that cyber resilience is not just a task for politicians and the state. They just give the guidelines, they give the main impulses, and they possibly also give the main strategy. But realization has to be conducted by an institution itself.
Mm-hmm. I also have like a quick question myself, if we still have the time for like one quick question. During your talk,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your talk, by the way. During your talk, you talked about like the plan to for the supply chain to get like chip creation, microchip creation in Europe. Is the objective of 2030 realistic? Because I think it takes a lot of time to build factories to make microchips. So do you have any visibility on this situation or not at all?
Yeah, so of course, and microprocessor is not microprocessors, or we are just talking about microprocessors, but of course they are very, very different, and we have very different kinds of technology that is being used in different products. So we also have to create the right products, the products that we really need and that we can use in the European Union. I think 2030 is a goal which might be difficult to reach, but I think it's not completely unrealistic, because the European Union says, or does not say, that we are completely sovereign coming to hardware in the year 2030. We just need some more percentage numbers to be able to, for example, to operate our critical infrastructures when it comes to hardware outages based on any political reason or geostrategic reason. And I would say, even though we do not reach that goal by 2030, it's a good approach at the moment to start with, because we have to tackle this challenge. We have to start with, and we need some goal. Otherwise, doing nothing would definitely not be an option here.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer.
You're welcome.
Okay, cool. So yeah, as unluckily time ran out, so there are still lots of interesting questions. So maybe we'll put them through the chat, and I can look at them in some future meeting. So yeah, I really loved it, because for me, you managed to do this thing. A lot of people are always lagging behind, and why do I need them? They're just hindering my work. And you managed to put this for me into perspective of saying, oh yeah, but it's also super useful, and it also has a huge positive impact, especially for enforcing policymaking and enabling the interaction between countries and so on. And so therefore, really big thank you for this presentation.
Thanks for the invitation.
And so for the next edition, which will be on the 28th of June, we'll have Mikael Asplund from the Linköping University in Sweden. And Mikael will be talking about formally verifying security properties of cyber physical systems, which is actually somehow related, because if we have a certification or formal verification, this is something that enables us also to interact with policymakers, with lawmakers, because it's then specified. And so, yeah, join again, and we're looking forward to seeing you next time. And you will see the trailer now. And yeah, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again to Dennis, and have a great time. See you in some weeks. Bye bye.
Cher Cybercéanie, pôle d'excellence région Bretagne. Au revoir et à la prochaine.
The front line of security research, more formal methods and rigorous methods to improve security. Cyber physical systems and their securities. An important area, we see a lot of cyber physical systems that are safety critical and therefore hugely important to society. Unfortunately, many of them are not properly secured. In this talk, I will be explaining how we can use formal methods, rigorous methods to improve the security of such systems.
Cher Cybercéanie, pôle d'excellence région Bretagne. Au revoir et à la prochaine.